Our friends at Just Stop Oil have engaged in their latest act of civil disobedience after invading the stage of Les Miserables in London's West End. Now, I may have some issues with the French, but frankly, I think this is a rather miserable step. I'm joined now by Just Stop Oil representative Chloe Naldrett. Chloe, thank you so much for joining me. Isn't it really nasty to ruin people's evening, people who've saved up to buy a ticket to go there for their birthday or a wedding anniversary, and some hooligans go in and disrupt the programme?
Thanks for having me on, Jacob. That's an interesting question. I'd just like to start by saying the big news of today, the big climate news of today, is that the scientists have run out of words to describe what is happening in respect of global annual average temperatures. We've just had the hottest global September on record. That follows the hottest July on record and the hottest August on record. So the situation that we're in, the scientists have got their heads in their hands.
But this isn't what I asked you about. I asked you whether it's deeply selfish and unpleasant to ruin people's harmless pleasure, which they've spent good money on. Are you going to compensate the people who were there?
What I'll say, Jacob, is that aside from being the parent of 2 young children, I also have a 20-year career in theatre. I'm a theatre professional. So I absolutely understand not only the frustration of the audience last night, but also the anxiety and the stress that was almost certainly caused to the performers on stage and the technical team working backstage. But, you know, what the cultural industries exist to do and what artists exist to do.
So are you actually condemning the protesters last night? Now you've said that, you feel sorry for the performers, sorry for the audience, sorry for the backstage hands?
No, I can hold 2 thoughts in my head at the same time, Jacob. I appreciate the disruption caused.
So this is crocodile tears, isn't it? You had somebody on crying on Sky News, another set of crocodile tears.
But what I will say is that we exist in the cultural industries and as artists to reflect society back at itself. And Les Miserables wasn't chosen by accident. Les Miserables is a story that starts off with a man being imprisoned for stealing a loaf of bread to feed a starving child. A woman is forced to sell her hair, then her teeth, and then her body to feed her child. And then at the exact moment that they disrupted the story last night, we have a revolution, an uprising of students against
but we've now got a democracy, which they didn't have in France at that time. Why don't you stand for election?
I haven't got time to stand for election, Jacob. We've got to work.
Well, you're too important to stand for election and put your name in front of voters.
Also, one of the most fantastic MPs we've had over recent years, who's done more for the climate than anyone else, Caroline Lucas, is stepping down from Parliament because she says she cannot achieve what she needs to do.
But that's because the Greens can't win an election, isn't it? That people only vote for one Green MP. So are you against democracy? Should we have a totalitarian state run by Just Stop Oil? Is that what you want?
I'm not against democracy. What I'm against
is stand for election then, because instead you just bully people.
Again, this government, which has no mandate because its leader was not chosen by the people, has announced 100. It's
got a majority in Parliament, which is how a constitution works.
In the North Sea. That announcement of new licences is against not just the advice but the warnings of the United Nations, the World Health Organization, every single climate scientist in the world.
But that announcement of licences actually reduces emissions, doesn't it? It will reduce emissions because they're lower if we use our own resources than import them.
If we burn fossil fuels, it will increase emissions.
But we're going to burn the same number of fossil fuels anyway. It's just ours rather than being imported.
It's not coming from me, Jacob. That's coming from experts.
But the experts acknowledge that it will reduce the emissions because it doesn't have the transportation emissions.
So we are being governed by a government that is not acting in the best interests of its people. And
we'll stand for election and see if people agree with you, rather than rioting.
I completely understand and support these young people who stepped up last night to say, as in the words that we hear in that show, it's time to decide who we are. Are we going to stand?
Thank you very much to Chloe Naldrett, the Just Stop Oil spokesman, for joining me this evening. I'll go back to my panel. Come on, Stephen, you're a socialist.
Of course
But you're a
Jacob,
Democrat
I'm a
as well, aren't you?
socialist. You know, I believe in democratic socialism. You know, I don't believe in revolution. I don't believe in narcissism. I don't believe in standing. And just because you can afford to live on the top of the hill, you occupy the moral high ground. And as far as I'm concerned, I think some of the JSO people are actually, you know, secret agents of big oil, because I've never known any group of people do more to denigrate a perfectly good cause than them with their particular actions at the present time.
And isn't this right, Mujaz, that they undermine their own case? And this, I can never get this refusal to stand for Parliament. They don't think anyone will vote for them, do they?
Well, exactly. They also think they're above the law. They think the law shouldn't apply to them as it applies to everyone else, because, frankly, they are arrogant and they think they're better than everyone else.
Well, I thought that wonderful line that she was too busy to stand for Parliament. She didn't have time to stand for
I
Parliament.
also rather like the idea of holding two thoughts in your head at the same time, which is a marvellous excuse for the sort of philosophical duality that you come up with.
It was great defence of hypocrisy, isn't it?
It's such a pious, quote, pious cause. They can do no wrong. Everyone else is wrong. They can do whatever they like. It's pathetic. But
it's also, it's just so mean, because lots of people go to a show in the West End. They're very expensive, these shows.
£150 minimum price for
you know, a couple go, that's £300 you're talking about, and their evening's ruined. And I don't know whether the theatre can afford to give them new tickets for another occasion, but even so, if you've gone for a particular birthday, that particular birthday never happens again. It's just such a nasty thing to...
Are you going to come blinking into the twilight of Covent Garden and say, do you know, I'm now convinced, I'm now entirely supporting their cause? Of course, it's entirely the opposite.
Many people in that audience will have been sympathetic.
Yeah,
you know,
not anymore.
They will have been sympathetic, and they've turned them against them.
Well, and you'd have guessed the cast would have been... I mean, this is very unfair generalisation, but a lot of people in the arts world are not particularly high Tories.
Yeah.
And you'd have thought they would be, as you say, quite sympathetic, and you would expect they've been rather put off now.
Yeah.
Well, I remember, I mean, I think before either of you two were born, when I used to go on the C&D marches, you know, 1959, 1960, and we had people like Pat Arrowsmith and people like Peggy Duff, and they used to absolutely say, whatever you do, you must not hold up the traffic, you must walk on this side of the road, they'll be properly marshalled. And this was the C&D. I said, don't chuck him out, because, you know, he's strayed into the middle of the road. And I think you've got to actually be a bit grown up about this, and you've got to look and just say, is this, what are we actually achieving by doing this? We're achieving a glorious sense of self-satisfaction. We're glowing like that breakfast cereal where the kids come and glow. You know, this absolute feeling.
Ready Brek.
Yeah,
Yes.
But that's what they're just glowing with, you know, narcissism and self-belief. And it's embarrassing, man. It's embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to my panel. After messages from our sponsors, is it yet another chapter of the nanny state as GPs are set to begin screening gambling addictions? Plus, my point